Welcome, everyone. My name's Stephen, and we are in Paul's first letter to Timothy, chapter 6. What really stuck out to me in these verses is how we as humans try to gain stuff, and how what we are trying to gain can be quite misguided, and the way we go about gaining it can also be quite misguided. Um, so, why don't we turn to verse 4? Uh, it's Paul sort of describing um, the false teachers at the time and really having a bit of a rant about them. Actually, they were trying to basically present doctrine that was different from our free gospel of salvation. And he says of them here in verse 4, he is puffed up with conceit and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy craving for controversy and for quarrels about words, which produce envy, dissension, slander, evil suspicions, and constant friction among people who are depraved in mind and deprived of the truth, imagining that godliness is a means of gain. So, that last part there, imagining that godliness is a means of gain, really spoke to me because sometimes I can do that, and I think we can do that sometimes. To think that by doing good stuff, by following Christ's command, for example, to, I don't know, give or to be kind and to love one another, that we're doing this to sort of, work ourselves up to gain God's approval, when really it's the opposite. Jesus has already done that. And this idea of us as humans trying to, reach God's standard is, I think, an especially or particularly strong theme in other religions, such as Islam, for example, where there's sort of rules you need to follow, pray 5 times a day, or even Judaism, where we have a total of, I believe, 613 laws to follow. Nice. How it's pretty much all about not touching this, don't do that. But when Jesus turned up, that of course got turned completely on its head, because now it's not about our work anymore. It's not about what we do. It's all about him. It's all about his work. It's all about what he has done. And Paul, in his other New Testament letter, Romans, actually says that the Old Testament law and all of the rules associated with that, that the purpose of that law was really just to reveal God's righteousness, to reveal how righteous God is, and by contrast, how sinful we are, and our seemingly inherent inability to be good, to reach God's standard on our own. And that would actually be, really bad news if it weren't for the fact that Jesus took the burden for us, and he lived a perfect life, and we can just rest in that and have that righteousness by putting our faith in him and repenting. So that's one way we try to gain. We try to use godliness to gain God's approval. But there's another way more simple way that we use every day, which is we just use our labor, right? We use, whether that's mental or physical labor, we try and use that to gain wealth or, money. And that can be dangerous, especially, people are sometimes tempted, or maybe we see on the news that people just compromise their morals in order to gain wealth, in order to gain money. And Paul warns us about this desire to be wealthy. Here in verse 9, he says, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. So he's essentially just talking about how that this desire, and especially this craving sometimes to be rich, can be quite dangerous for us. Whether again that is because we compromise our morals to gain it, or whether we may start idolizing money for whatever reason. He warns us about this, and he actually tells us what we should do, or what we should desire to do. Instead, he tells us to aim to be rich in good works. Instead, he wants us to be generous and ready to share and to do good. And he doesn't just say that; he gives us a reason for it. He says towards the end of verse 19, he says, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. So I'm not saying that having money or having a car or having a big house is necessarily bad, but one thing these things are not is they're not life. Is what Paul is essentially saying. Those things are not life. True life can only be found in Christ, can only be found in His gospel and the love and the salvation and everything else we find in Him. So why don't we try and remember that today and in the coming weeks? Hope you enjoyed this and see you tomorrow.